Okay, so we're looking. So the I4 is. So we've got some things here on using data to improve design and instruction. I'm not going to be up here for that long. We'll leave that to Joel and Megan. But there's a tool that we're using in the design services that came up in Blue Carpet in the curriculum committee, and a number of faculty who were there had suggested that all the faculty know about this tool. So I'm going to show it to you. I won't speak to anything about user interface design or anything like that because it was never designed for sort of widespread use. But so I'll go through this, and if you guys have any questions about that, we can probably take a few. So the point of this tool is to estimate time that's involved in reading resources, viewing resources, as well as working on assignments, particularly written assignments. I'm not going to speak to math or computer science kinds of things that take calculations and are not written stuff. But one of the things that we noted is that we're probably underestimating currently how much work we're actually assigning. So I wanted to talk about removing the overload for the students and giving them time to do the best they can on the work that we assign them. So currently, time estimates are required in Blue Quill as far as our design standards go. And right now, they're largely based on sort of a gut feeling as well as the personal estimates of content experts. That's us as faculty, it's the SMEs that we bring in. And this is a little bit problematic because it suffers from the classic expert-novice gap as far as those who are experts in the field, those who have PhDs and other graduate degrees, are able to do things like research and writing a lot faster than our students. They're not as practiced at it. And so a lot of our estimates sort of are a little bit under of what we really can expect from our students. So the Center for Teaching Excellence at Rice University a number of years ago created what they call this course workload estimator. And it's based on research on actual student reading and writing rates that they found in the literature. And this is the data that's sort of the data tables that it's based on. So for reading, it's based on 3 different factors: page density, so like what kind of reading resource it might be, whether it's a trade kind of paperback, whether it's a monograph, which includes that 600-word estimate is pretty similar to a lot of journal articles, and then textbooks tend to be a lot more dense. And then also purpose, which is sort of listed here as survey, understanding, and really engaging with the text, and complexity, the sort of a generalized idea of how many new concepts are in the reading. For the writing data, it's basically based on 2 factors, and that is the purpose of the writing, so what kind of writing it is, so whether it's reflection or narrative writing, which goes a little faster, argumentative, where you have a point that you're trying to make, or research, where you're actually really trying to take in a lot of information from varied sources and really process it together. And then the degree of drafting. So if you're expecting there to be a fair bit of editing involved versus if you're not really expecting a lot of drafting, maybe something like discussion posts. One of the things we'll note, though, as if you can sort of see it here at least, is that this is not designed for learning object level estimates. This is designed for more traditional university where they're estimating how many pages of writing per week, or for the whole semester, how many pages of reading per week, and the page density and the difficulty and all those things are sort of generalized for all the resources. that might be included. And the same thing with the writing estimates. So that doesn't really work that well for us. So what I've done is I've created an Excel sheet that we use that breaks this down, the same data, down in a way that we can actually use it at the learning object level. So the sheet includes 4 different pages that can be used to look at a textbook. So in this case, we can actually we can pick the purpose and pick the difficulty that generates a words per minute. We can pick then the words per page, the page density there. And that gets us the number of pages per hour. We can we can enter in the start pages for all the chapters in the textbook. It gives us the hours estimate of how long we can expect it to take. And we can then even assign that to the week in the course, which will give us, and this combines in a number of different tables here, the full reading and prep object estimates, which will include this information from up to 4 different textbooks, additional reading. So if you have articles that are in here in your course, we can include that. The same thing for unpaginated resources like blog posts or websites or things of that nature, as well as, I'm not sure it's actually, it must not be in here, but we can do this, but we include the same thing for videos. If you have a number of longer videos that you want students to watch, we have a way to include that as well. The writing calculator here shows, so you can put in the assignment name, the genre, so whether it's research or reflection, the degree of drafting, whether it's double space or single space. Most of those are obviously going to be double space because we're using APA, which will give us pages per hour. And if you want to use word estimates instead of page estimates, we can do that. It'll work both ways. But that gives us the hours for the assignment. The thing here that I think is most important to take into account is that based on these estimates, a 6-page research paper is going to take about 24 hours of work, which is a lot more than what we've been estimating for papers of that length. And that is with research writing, minimal drafting, which is estimated by Rice to be about 1 draft. And I take into account those who are editing as they write, and things of in that sort of way of doing things. So the implications here is that most of our BQ object hours are pretty underestimated, and they take a lot longer than what we're saying they do. And that we should look at the reading and writing time estimates when the students tell us they're putting in a lot more hours than estimated, because our actual data-based estimates are confirming that. And then in the addition, what to do about this is that we may need to be designing fewer assignments that are either shorter or fewer, and that they be higher quality assignments, and that they allow the students the time that they need to do their best work, because that's really what we're trying to do. What that may mean is that your assignments take a little bit more, or take a slightly broader focus, or more of a synthetic kind of approach, so that we can capture more of the learning objectives in fewer assignments. So that is where we're sort of going from here. The other added benefit, last thing, is that hopefully this actually allows your instructors to provide more feedback or better quality feedback, because they're not grading as many assignments. So, yeah, a little bonus there.
Will designers be doing that calculation routinely?
Yes, they should be. That is the. Sorry. So yes. So the question was whether designers will be using this routinely, and yes, is the answer. We are supposed to be doing that. Joanna. So the question was, have we put any thought into putting the same kind of rigor into estimating instructor time? I don't think that's been discussed previously. It's certainly something that we could look into, and if we want to, try and look at what that takes, yeah, that's certainly something we could do.
Joanna, can you talk a little bit more about what you're thinking about there?
Thank you, Cody. Yes, Cody asked me to elaborate a bit. So obviously there are great benefits in determining how long it will take a student to complete assignments. And we expect from our instructors then to provide the type of quality feedback that we'd like. But anecdotally is all the information we have right now to try to guesstimate how long it will take an instructor to grade one assignment, look at a discussion board, answer questions, and that type of thing. So perhaps if we could devote time to mapping out with the same amount of great data that we have for students, if we could do the same thing for instructors, then we would know as we design a course what a reasonable number of assignments or activities are for an instructor, so we can be fair to them in allowing them the time they need to do what we've asked them to do.
I completely agree that that's a worthwhile effort, for sure, and maybe something that we can do with, if we have instructors who are willing to really track their time and being those who might be under observation or something like that, so that we have an idea of the quality of the feedback that they're producing in that time, yeah, for sure.
Other questions? Namet?
So does that time calculator distinguish between like math books versus some other books? Because math books include more formulas and graphs and may require more time to really understand what they're reading?
Right, exactly. So typically what we're using is the some new concepts sort of level of complexity is where we're finding most books are lying, where they're lying with that. With the math, I would definitely be leaning towards the many new concepts to sort of represent the complexity involved. But again, and I think that's something that we can do for the reading. What I haven't been able to do is find anything with regard to estimating work time through both for any kind of technical work, whether it be coding or just working through math problems and things of that nature. Carol?
Jesse, coming from a university that used Quality Matters to have their online courses, quote unquote, certified, there was a push from those instructional designers at that campus to have two types of assignments. One was much faster, kind of a self-assessment, so that students could see for themselves, hey, I'm getting this or I'm not getting this. And we were asked to create those with quick multiple choice, true, false, just so they could get a feel for their learning. And then you moved more into the substantive assessments. I don't see a lot of those in the Franklin courses. And when I hear cutting back on assessments to give them more time, I'm wondering if we could perhaps consider adding some of those quick hit self-assessments so that we as instructors can at least see in the first couple of weeks if our students are getting it or not. Because if we're cutting back on assessments, I'm fearful we're going to get to a point that we're doing 2 or 3, and by the time we realize they're not getting it, it's too late to intervene.
Yeah, from an instructional design point of view, I agree with you completely. I think all of us over at I4 probably would. With regard to that, I'm not sure. Certainly, if you're wanting to do that and you talk with your instructional designer that you're working with for your course design, I don't see any problem why we wouldn't be able to do that. In that case, I think we'd probably end up using the assess tool for that. It probably gives you the quickest way to get to the data. And if they're only smaller, quicker assignments like that, that tool should be sufficient.
So part of our definition of a credit hours is it's 30 hours of work for 1 credit hour.
Right.
And that was based on this accelerated learning format. But what I'm hearing here is that this is not acceleratable. That this is the same, reading and writing is the same whether or not you're taking a traditional class or one of our accelerated classes. So my question is, should we be rethinking the number of hours as a credit hour?
See, well, I guess the thing, right, is that we've been using that same estimate for how many hours of work that is, at least over in I-4, for whether it's a 16, 15-week course or whether it's a 6-week course. And the assumption is that, well, if you've got a 12-week 4-credit course, you're spending 10 hours a week. And if it's a 6-week course, and you're spending 20 hours a week. So that is the understanding that at least we've been working with within I-4.
I'm not debating the understanding.
Right.
What I'm debating is the definition of it.
I mean, you don't feel obligated
Yeah,
to
that's-
necessarily
yeah,
take that
that-
question
yeah, that I
yourself.
think is
That's
beyond-
more of a
beyond the
that's a
discussion
faculty
here.
question in general here. So is there anyone out here want to weigh in on that conversation as well before we move on? Or is it enough to have food for thought?
All right.
Going once?
Nope.
Going twice?
One more. Yeah, Beverly?
So I think at least when we had the IACPE accreditation, that was an accreditation issue that we keep it at least to that. That was minimum, is to have the 20 hours a week if it's a 6-week class versus the 12 weeks. So I don't think, at least from the assignments that we have that and what we get on end of course surveys, that most of our students are spending that much time, and that's what IACPE told us, at least in some of the classes. And so to cut assignments, or again, I understand if you're going to make them more rigorous or whatever, but we really have to be careful, I think, when we start cutting number of hours. And again, my students, at least in a lot of the classes, are not spending what they're supposed to be for accreditation.
I think it's worth to note HLC also had reservations about how we calculate credit hours.
Hey, this is Evan Shalupka for those online. Jesse, I'm just curious if Rice had anything to say about the way in which activities build up to major writing assignments, right, in courses. And if they're seeing, I know in English studies, right, the big movement is to build up smaller assignments that really make explicit planning and drafting stages to sort of minimize that big, kind of final draft time and put students in a position. So I'm just wondering if Rice is saying anything about that, a best practice in terms of being sensitive to writing and research time as assignments sequence with one another, and if I-4, right, has been given that same thought to that consideration.
So with regard to that, Rice is not saying anything at all with that. In fact, if you look at the tool, it is sort of an overarching thing for a semester is the way that they're looking at it. For us, as we're looking at it at the object level, we can take that scaffolding sort of approach into account so that the later assignments that are much bigger, if we've been leading up to it, we certainly don't need to take the same kind of time, right, with those later assignments, and we can assume that they've been working on it prior to that. And yes, I think that when that makes sense, we're certainly doing that. I know that I designed that into English 080 when I did that for the Title III project, that we did build up those kinds of things very specifically.
Okay, we'll take one more, and then we'll let Megan and Joel finish up.
So I think it is a comment about that time estimate. Again, looking at this, we also have, it's a good starting point, it's a good indicator, but I think there are so many other factors that we've not considered. Say, for example, the student population that we are talking about here. Again, I don't know whether that was tested with the traditional student, and we are having adult student with very different preparations. And so that is why the number of hours they are taking might be higher because of course maybe some of them don't have very good preparations when they get into some of our courses. So I think it's something to think about, and maybe as an institution we want to do our own and find out how this is working out.
For sure, yes. It was tested with, I believe the research that they were using was with traditional students. So certainly there is a difference there. And if it's something that anybody's wanting to look into more, might very well be going, I'm not sure, but it might be covered by the umbrella IRB. So that's certainly something that we can look into, actually looking at, and maybe we can look at talking about that with Yaron.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, I'll keep us moving here. So kind of the point of what we're presenting here, at least Jesse and myself, is that we're trying to do our best to be as consistent as we can with the information that we have. So this tool that Jesse just presented is based on research. If there's more research that we can bring in that's maybe better for our context, great. We're not necessarily saying, hey, let's reduce the number of hours. I think there was a comment that we were concerned about reducing hours. We're concerned about having the accurate number of hours estimated. So sometimes we may have been low or high. We're trying to be accurate. And this really came out of over a year ago, or around a year ago, when the HLC came to visit, and they had some concerns about how we were estimating. They looked in our courses and saw that in some cases there were no estimates there, or that the estimates appeared to be inaccurate. So this was our response to that, to really try to be as consistent as we can. Another way that we're trying to do this is through the course data analytics tool. And I think everyone has probably seen a version of this tool in the past. But when you're a lead faculty or a program chair, you have a lot of questions that you're always asking yourself. There's always these questions. And some of those key questions, I think, are, how are my instructors doing in my courses? How are my instructors doing? How are the students performing in these courses? And then an overarching question is, how are the courses performing? How well are these courses serving the students, or the needs of the students and the instructors? And so this tool, the Course Data Analytics tool, is one of the things that we've put together, really collaborating with Rick Shoup and Chris Coble in IE to develop an instrument that we can use. Now, this is a tool that we use for our course design, and so we wanted to show you how we're using this just briefly. Now, what we noticed was, in the past, when you want to go see how your instructors are doing in the courses, you go to Blue Quill and you can go and see their all the different reports that are there. You can look at the student evaluations. The problem with this is that they're separate, they're distinct. So this tool actually allows us to synthesize all of this information together so you can see it holistically at a course level or an instructor level or semester by semester. You're able to really do that. I meant trimester, not semester. Sorry about that. Okay. So just a few points here. We can look, the types of data that come into this reporting are student profiles, student course evaluations. This is the quantitative, the little ratings they do, and also their comments that they make. The assignment grades, the course grades, doozy rates, these are all put into this reporting tool for your review. And so when an instructional designer begins a course design, if it's an existing course, they'll look at this data to try to find out what we might call some of the health markers. So, you go to the doctor's office and they say, well, let's take your blood pressure. All right, let's look at your heart rate and your oxygen levels, depending on the situation. Maybe we'll get some blood drawn. So we're not going to draw your blood, but we are going to take these health measures for your courses to try to figure out where things are and see where we need to investigate further when we redesign the course. So, for example, there's a tool here that allows us to look at assignments, the course assignments over time, the grades for the assignments. So if there are some that drop below where we want to see them, then we can target those specifically to try to understand what's going on, look further into course student comments or talk with the adjuncts to understand what's going on there. Another example is the SRI data. So here is a sort of summary of the SRI data for this particular course. And we're looking at trying to understand what's going on here. It lets you know, hey, was the instructor recommended by the students? What about the course? To get a feel for where some of those problem areas might be. This is a tool that's available, that should be available to you as well. And so if you'd like to have access to this, I think we've sent the link out many times, but the link has changed recently, so we'll make sure to get that available to you so that you have access to this. And hopefully it'll help you answer some of those major questions that you have. How's my course doing, and my students and my instructor, to help you move forward. All right, Megan. Oh, any questions about the course data analytics tool? All right, thanks, guys.
So Lewis's point earlier about being able to take student demographic population, take other variables and factor them together was really well noted. And part of what Jesse and Joel presented on are these different components that combine together and I think will provide us with a holistic picture of what is taking place with your courses. And one of the other items that we want to do is we want to increase the time to get that information to you so that when you're going through your redesign, you have a holistic picture of what is taking place in the course. Part of that picture involves instructor performance. And we've talked over the years, actually, about Chickering and Gamson's 7 principles of effective instruction. And those principles have really, we've honed in on 4 core elements that we want to make certain that as we look to construct a portrait of quality instruction, we focus on those 4 elements, and those 4 elements are feedback, communication, technology, and those other key instructional practices, such as using relevant examples and activating prior learning, and those concepts. So under that construct, we set out over the last year to kind of look for different ways to improve through blue carpet initiatives. Thank you to Martina Pong, and thank you so much to Brenda Jones for the work that you've done in the feedback group. Because the kind of conceptual framework that we've laid out will allow us to then take that concept and apply it and instantiate it in the different technologies that we use. A great example is the work that Brenda was doing and how that has directly informed working with ATC and our Gradebook 2.0. It also will be revisiting our observation protocol and looking at the way that we use those definitions and those categories to effectively assess the instruction that's taking place in the classroom. So in the fall of 2018, Academic Operations Task Force revisited some of the weightings, and the goals began with looking at what are the categories that are indicative of quality instruction and what is the weighting that we want to assign to that. Instructional practices was at 36%. Feedback, we had a very lengthy discussion about this because of the nature of the way that our learners are in an accelerated format, are online, are communicating with our instructors. We actually upticked this very significantly in terms of the weighting because that feedback that the students get in terms of the quality and in terms of the timeliness will help inform how they're able to move forward in their course. So that counts for 39%. Communication, so important, and we looked at different indicators that can be provided to us through analytics and Blue Quill, and we right now have 18% established for that, but there's a lot of discussion that we've had over the year about how feedback is actually a form of communication and how to slice and dice the categorization. In order to establish kind of a benchmark, we said 18% now, and let's revisit this and iteratively improve it over the years so that we can come up with a good definition, good categories, and have the right indicators that inform that from the system that are being generated. And so as a result of that, we had technology fall into a 7% category, and part of that was just because we haven't been able to tap into the power of the Blue Quill analytics quite yet to be able to give us a quick indicator of the quality of instruction. We can readily say things like, did the instructor log into their course in the last week, which I guess, is indirectly telling you something about if there isn't quality instruction taking place, because if they're not logging in and they're not communicating with students, it can't be quality. But that kind of yes-no indicator really isn't what we're trying to get at. And so with that, we looked at those 4 categories, and we have our 3 instruments that we use to evaluate. Observations is the most powerful and informative tool that we have, because it's expert or peer-to-peer review of the instruction that's taking place in the classroom, and so we put that at the highest weighting. Student ratings of instruction, SRI, other people will call it SEI, student evaluations of instruction, but we typically use the term SRI around here. That also does inform. It's not indicative of the quality, but it is one more data point that we can have help to construct a comprehensive evaluation of what's taking place in terms of the experience in the classroom. And then the LMS data, which I mentioned, we have a couple key indicators right now. So one of them is timeliness of feedback and when the grades get loaded in, which you guys do get emails about when your instructors don't load in their grades or there's anything missing after day 7. And so you can follow up on that. But what we did this year was we took some of the great ideas over the years, Todd Whitaker being one of them, Bruce Ramsey, a few other folks that we've spoken to about feedback, Tim Raymond as well, and we tried to create a BI dashboard that gave us this kind of just-in-time, you log in and you see your instructor's performance and you can see if they're in the green or the yellow or the red, and this is actually a version of the Power BI tool that we have up, but because of the way that the data feeds, one of the major indicators, you have the total score, and then you have your faculty observations, which account for 51.5% of the weighting. So if an instructor doesn't have a faculty observation completed in the system, then it's going to take it to 0, and then it's going to take everything to the red. So part of our ability to use this tool will be informed by the data that comes into it through faculty observations, and then of course SRIs is feeding into that right now, as well as LMS scores, which operate as at 100% unless they reach X number of late assignments being turned in, and it kind of dings them down from there. So you can look it up by class, you can look it up by instructor, and the same way that the course analytics tool is being used, you can navigate to a specific instructor and look at that. We also provide the SRI information that's updated in real time, being, I got in trouble for saying real time when really it's like 24 to 48 hours. So, but much more real time than what we're used to in terms of it's quicker than getting that annual SRI data being sent to you each year around February. So the hope is that this kind of presentation of the data, this kind of timeliness and turnaround will allow you to see what's taking place in your classrooms, and if there's any little tweak that you need to make or little conversation that you can have with the instructor outside of this more formal observation process, that would be helpful to you all to assure the overall quality of the course. The other thing that we did this year was we revisited the observation rubric, and we did eliminate a couple of questions, and I think we have a little bit more work to do this year in terms of being able to fold in and make it certain that in our observation rubric, what we've done is we've asked the right question to align with one of those 4 categories. So if it does not align with the 4 categories, then we should either add categories or take away the question, right? So it's really a question about alignment in terms of these are the concepts we say we want to look for. Now here's how we're going to look for it. Here's the specific indicator, and here's the category that it matches to. That hadn't been there in previous years, so there was a bit of a stretch being made in terms of the questions that we were asking, and so we tried to narrow that focus down to ask just what is the right question to be able to get that indicator to inform the quality of the instruction. Also, what we did was we wrapped the observation protocol into a overarching process. So the pre-observation process should be taking place, whether it is at Urbana or at Franklin, in terms of clarifying the roles, explaining the purpose of this process as being a formative one, not an evaluative one, elucidating some basic tenets of how we are measuring instructional excellence through providing information on the 4 categories, and then also providing the rubric to the adjunct faculty as well. We incorporated it this last year into 501, so every new adjunct does see the rubric, does see those questions, does see this actual very graph, but we are still noticing a gap with our current adjunct faculty not understanding the process, as well as some of our full-time faculty. So we did a training for the new faculty, and if there's any questions that you have about this process, please feel free to follow up with me anytime. Also, we added the request for information if necessary. There may be a possible world, and I'd welcome any of you guys' feedback on this, where one rubric does not effectively capture the reality of face-to-face instruction for CCP, let's say, in Urbana. And what we're trying to do is utilize the current rubric that we have right now, but if it becomes evident that we simply cannot effectively measure what's going on in these classrooms using this rubric, we may need to have a spin out. And we've already been in conversations with the nursing program to look at the way that we measure the clinicals and the things going on within that. But right now, for the Urbana observations, you're going to want to request some additional information, because you're not going to be able to go into Blue Quill and see the syllabus and see the assignments and see the grades. That may be a nice end state, but we'll need to see evidence of student feedback and assessment taking place, what is being provided to the students in terms of assignments and what's being graded, and there may be other materials that you suggest as well. Previously, also, the way the process was set up was when you go into the observation form and you say, okay, I, Megan, am going to be observing Joel, I would be triggered with a email that would take me to the form to complete. Joel would get nothing until I completed my portion, and then it would trigger Joel to complete his portion. We had a lot of discussion in our observation task force about the order and sequencing, and we even piloted the reverse of that order at Urbana, and it seemed to work really well, where the self-evaluation portion of the observation was completed first. The observer was then notified and was able to either look at that or finish their observation, and then they would look to align how the different goals and different foci would work out over the next year. Some really liked that, some didn't, and so what we changed in the process for this year was choose your own adventure. What happens when you assign that observer and that observee is you both get sent the link to complete at your own independent discretion, and if you would like your observee, if I would like Joel to complete his portion first, I would simply specify that in the email that I send to Joel, or if I wanted to complete mine first, I would do that, and then I would follow up with Joel. We felt like it's important in all of this to preserve the freedom and the flexibility while having a general standard for the form, and I hope that we've done that service, at least for this year, in any ways we can improve it for next year. Post-observation, also what we did to improve the rubric was, for those that are new in being trained, and for our coaches and our coaching training over the next year, we are saying 2 goals should be established no matter what for every observation that's conducted. It can be the most minor or taking a course or something like that, setting up a time to meet with CTE. But they should be SMART goals or peers goals, which comes from Jim Knight's on instructional coaching, or some kind of stretch goal. Anything that you can do, just establish clear goals with the person that you're observing so that they can advance their instruction and that it's a benefit to them. your time and your assessment. Offering encouragement and insights as needed in identifying the shared support needs. And then establishing a follow-up date as needed. So now when you complete the rubric, if you say, have a follow-up by CTE, that's going to send an email to both myself and Brandy Bagar-Fraley, and we're going to follow up with you to see what needs you have that we can help support that instructor in. So this is just information for your reference, actually. This is where the form is located. I understand that over the last year, I think we've changed a few different SharePoint sites a few different times. This will be another way that you can have this reference to the form. It does require you to be on the Franklin network, so if you're not conducting the observation on campus, you'll need to VPN in to access the form. And then once you complete your side of it, you can actually go into, it was a point of interest to me, this migration to bi.franklin.edu, because right now you go to reports.franklin.edu and you log in and you can get your data out to send and review. I don't know what that future state holds in terms of placing it in BI, but the rubric looks very similar to how it had previously, except for we cleaned up a little bit of the different categories that we had you going through. And so now you just have 3 places: observation rubric with the 12, 13 questions, the general summary box, and then the additional recommendations for faculty development. Any information you complete on the additional recommended faculty development will be sent to CTE and we'll follow up. This is a little bit irrelevant right now, I think, but this is how you get to the reports.franklin.edu to access that data. If it changes or when it changes, I'll make certain that I notify you guys in terms of sending out a full-time faculty email. And then over the next year, we are focusing on core component 3C that Danielle had spoken about earlier. And in terms of appropriately qualified faculty, something that we didn't really have a lot of opportunity to share with all of you, but that work that you put in for the credentialing and the differentiation of whether or not the adjuncts were standard or 18 credit hours or alternative criteria and all the documentation, for as hectic as I know it was, we did not get any feedback from HLC except for expectation met, which was a little underwhelming for us because we had put in months and months of effort, and you guys had as well, but that's the best that you can do for this kind of thing. And I want to thank you guys all for that, and we'll be looking this year to migrate our credentialing database from Digital Measures, which I know is not the most user-friendly product, and we are currently vetting other products and making certain that one of our business requirements is that it's easy to use for you all and easy for you guys to update your information, and that information feeds into the faculty profiles, which we're also going to be revamping over this next year. The other thing that we're going to do over this year is look to expand coaching and have coaching be not only for new faculty, but also for current faculty. And so we have established a 2-tier coaching consult where if you have just a minor component that you want to learn more about, you can go to our new faculty development space and request a coach. The coaches will have a faculty profile with designated expertise in particular areas. So if you wanted to learn more about how to give better feedback, for example, you'd look up a coach that has an expertise in that, and then you can submit a form saying that you want a quick coaching consult. That, in addition to items like global instruction, in addition to items like education technology, we'll be featuring our coaches much more prominently over this next year so that current faculty can also get up to speed on the information that they want to help develop their skill set. Adept in teaching, just my quick plug for Zoom. Zoom really gives us the opportunity to model engaged online instruction with its bandwidth and optimization of web conferencing, so that the kinds of issues that we would run into from a technology standpoint for Adobe Connect, such as if you move too fast on the camera, you could get kicked out. Zoom has a way to adapt to that, and what it does is it would decrease the video quality, for example, if your bandwidth was lower. And it also gives you opportunity to share your screen so that you don't have to spend 10 minutes loading up your PowerPoints in advance of the meeting. And so these kinds of adaptations and the web conferencing as well will really help to give that face-to-face feel, so to speak, because it allows the other students in the class to talk to one another through breakout rooms. It allows you to engage as an instructor in terms of a lot of the nonverbal feedback. And then instructors accessible for student inquiry. We are really welcoming feedback, working with ATC over this next year to look for ways to improve the communication. There sometimes too many different avenues can lead to too much confusion. So we're not looking to open up every opportunity. A good example of this was the IMing feature in Blue Quill that then students would IM and then email and then load, and then you would know which question you answered and when and what came in. So we're looking to improve communication while at the same time be able to streamline it for the instructors so that they know what's presented to them and can respond accordingly. And then we'll continue to look for ways to use our data to advance instruction and curriculum. And I see over this next year us looking for new ways to assess what we're doing and bring it all together comprehensively as an institute. So thank you. That was all I had for today. Oh, we do have an adjunct need to know slide that some of our previous groups didn't have added. But this slide is going to be the slide that we take out, and then we'll send it to all of you so that as you're going forward with your adjunct retreats over this coming summer, you'll be able to see these slides and have them readily available and go through them with your adjuncts. Not sure if that was discussed earlier, but this is just information for them to know over this next year.